I take care of quite a few setups, all of which include a variety of different plants. And to avoid having to keep buying new plants for every single project, I like to propagate as much as possible. However, over time not all of my attempts were successful and I'm left with a bunch of empty boxes. So in this video I'll be showing you how I propagate various different plants while I reorganize my propagation setup. I like to store and propagate plants in these kinds of plastic tubs. These are fairly cheap, keep the humidity up and will get the plants used to the conditions of a terrarium. However, just like a terrarium, it's better to include a false bottom before we add plants. But truth be told, I don't do this for all of the tubs. Because in case of propagation, it's more of a luxury than a necessity. The false bottom can be made using a layer of clay pebbles, but for this one I would like to try using a coarse filter sponge. I cut it to size and then start adding the plants. I've been really disorganized with these bins and just threw random stuff together. However, I now want to organize everything to streamline the process of finding the right plant. So in this first box I'll be adding all of my non-vining plants. There are not a whole lot for now, but that's fine. Now explaining how to propagate plants can be a bit tricky as not all plants propagate the same way. Plants like this Pilea or this Fetonia are very easy to propagate. You simply get a pair of scissors and you cut them in half. Next you can just put the offcut straight into the soil and it'll root. Easy as that. However, with other plants, like for example this mini palm tree, you'll just have to wait until the plant shoots off runners on its own and then you can split them off and get a second plant. And lastly, I also have this Calathea. Now notice how this plant is actually made up out of a lot of smaller little stems, and for now this plant is not doing so well, but if it gets a bit bigger with a lot more leaves, you can actually just split it down the middle, get some of the stems on one plant, some of the stems to the other plant, repot it in 2 new pots, and you just basically copy your plant. Next up are my vining plants. These are really easy to propagate and often will do most of the work for you. Most vining plants have nearly the same layout. There's a center branch running the entire length of the plant, and all over the place there are leaves branching off. If the plant gets big enough, it will start growing new roots along the center branch. Most often this happens when the branch is touching the ground, but it could also happen while the plant is suspended. In that case you can cut the plant right underneath the roots and you'll have an extra plant, just like that. However, this doesn't always happen, so I will often also just cut the plant wherever I feel like it. This is most often right above a leaf, so we'll have as much of the central branch as possible, which I'll then just stick into the soil, just like the Pilea and the Fetonia. I also have one extra tub for my Oakley creeping fig. This plant is somewhat hard to come by here in the Netherlands, and to make sure I'll never run out of this plant, I decided to make a backup. But that just about sums up the terrestrial plants. However, I also propagate aquatic plants. For these I use a mixture of garden soil and aquarium gravel, and I make sure to make this stuff nice and muddy. I used to grow a few different species all in their own tub, but since I'm only propagating 3 varieties, I'm going to split this tub in 4 and put everything in one single tub. Now despite what you might think, most aquarium plants will grow really well above water as long as the roots stay wet. In fact, most aquarium plants will even grow faster out of water than they will underwater. That said, some plants will completely transform and will need some time to adapt to either growing immersed or submerged. Finally, I also have a lot of tubs in which I've tried to grow ferns from spores. This experiment wasn't really successful, but the species I was most excited about did make it. These are Australian tree ferns. Now they're still very small and they will continue to grow very slowly. However, they do have the potential to grow up to 15 meters tall and live up to 400 years old. And I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, it's now time to clean this mess up. And I'll be storing these containers in the neat Koa's tank. Here I've installed an LED strip on a timer, providing these plants with 10 hours of light each day. But you don't need to go this extreme. Putting a box like this near a window will work as well. Just make sure to keep it out of direct sunlight. And there you have it, my propagation setup. Now from this point onward I just pretty much let these bins be. I check up on them about once a month, maybe add a little bit of water here and there, but that's about it. However, I didn't tell you anything about the substrate I'm using. So if you want to learn how to make the ultimate terrarium substrate, I recommend you watch this video next. I'll see you there.